Hello, welcome to another video from the conscientious biologist, Ben Gallagher. This one's the 7th in the body communication series and now takes us away from nervous communication to look at the second main mechanism with which your body communicates with itself. This is using hormones, which come from endocrine glands of the endocrine system. This is from the GCSE syllabus, and as always, I'll ask that you please do subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at the biggest and most obvious question first of what are hormones? Well, hormones are chemical messages and they get around your body in the blood. So already we can see there's a big difference between the nervous system and the hormonal system in that one uses nerve impulses that travel along nerves, one's using chemical messages that travel around in your blood. But these hormones are produced by the endocrine system. So we've got two main communication systems, the endocrine system and the nervous system. Now in the exams, it's very, very common. They'll ask you to compare the two. So let's do that quickly. I'll put the two headings up there and I'm going to use analogies here to try and help you to understand which one's which. So with the nervous system, it's like an old-fashioned phone system. Not mobile phones, phones like this that are wired into the wall. You've probably got one at home, okay? Now with old-fashioned phone systems, you make your signal, the signal travels down the phone cable, underground, maybe for hundreds of miles, gets to the other person, they receive that signal instantly, they can hear the message, they can respond to it, but then it's gone. It wasn't recorded anywhere, so it's just very quick, create a signal, send it down a wire, picked up the other end, done, okay? The endocrine system is much more like old-fashioned letters, where you write your letter, so you've created an actual message, you're going to send it, and the actual message itself, the letter, has to travel a long, long distance to get to the specific person. It matches the specific person because you write their name and address on the envelope, so it gets to them. They can check, oh yeah, that's me, that matches my address, that's my name, yeah, it's my message. They can read it, they can respond to it. But they can read it over and over again. There's a physical thing that is still there that they can respond to. So it's like an old-fashioned phone system compared to an old-fashioned letter system. So to summarize that, there's three key points that you can contrast. Does it use electrical impulses or chemical hormones? So that's the key difference. Do those signals travel in neurons or do they travel in the blood? Is it fast and temporary, like a nervous signal that's rapidly travels down the wires, down the neurons, and then it's gone? Or is it slower and longer lasting, like a letter? Those three contrasting points what you'll be expected to put down in the exam. So make sure you've got those. What we'll do now, we'll pull up a body because we're going to look through the endocrine system. We're going to go one endocrine gland at a time. For most of those glands, I'll tell you a little bit about them, but I will bring up the hormones that gland produces that you need to know. Some of them we'll talk about very briefly now on this picture. Some of them we'll talk about in subsequent slides, but in this lesson. But some of them, if they're very complex, they'll be in further videos that we'll do later on. Okay, so let's start off with this one. This is quite often referred to as your master gland, your pituitary gland, because it's kind of the master of all the other endocrine glands. It can coordinate signaling to different glands to tell them what to do. So this is like the boss of your endocrine system. It's located in the middle of the brain, and there's three key hormones you need to know that the pituitary gland can create. And remember, I should say, hormones are proteins. Remember, proteins do everything. So if it's something doing something in the body, it's probably a protein. So what we're talking about is cells in the pituitary gland reading their DNA, reading the signal for how to make growth hormone, let's say, and using ribosomes to create that protein that is the growth hormone. Okay, so growth hormone's a fairly obvious one. It's the hormone that makes your body grow. You produce different amounts of it at different times in your life. When you're a little baby, you produce loads of it because babies grow very quickly. At puberty, you create lots more of it so you can have rapid growth spurts during puberty. But once you're old, like me, you hardly produce any growth hormone at all because I'm already fully grown. So most people stop producing much growth hormone at an age around about 20. Okay. The other two up there, FSH and LH, we're not going to talk about now because they're involved in the hormonal control of the menstrual cycle, which is a whole video on its own in a couple of videos time. But growth hormone, remember, is from the pituitary and it just makes you grow. Second one, we've got a gland in our neck here. This is called the thyroid gland. Really important because the thyroid gland produces something called thyroxine. Now, thyroxine is a hormone that basically tells your body how fast it needs to work. Okay, thyroxine controls your metabolism. Now remember back to many previous videos where we talked about your metabolism being the sum total of all the reactions that happen in your cells. So thyroxine hormone can tell your body, do those reactions faster, we need loads of stuff, or it can slow them down. Okay. By the way, at the end of this presentation, I'm going to put a whole table up that summarizes all these hormones. So don't worry if you're struggling to remember them all now. We will go back through them and I'll give you something easy to take a screenshot of. Okay, the thyroid gland in the neck, you're likely to be asked to label these glands when you come to your exams. Next, we've got a very big one right in the middle of your body, the pancreas. Now, the pancreas should already be very familiar to you, because it's one of the key organs in your digestive system. Your pancreas is an amazing organ. It can make loads of types of digestive enzyme, which it secretes into the duodenum at the start of your small intestine, so that those enzymes can digest your food. But it's also an endocrine gland, meaning it can make hormones. So it's got a dual purpose. It's a really clever organ. Now, the two that the pancreas makes are insulin and glucagon. Those two control blood sugar levels, but that's quite complex, so we're going to look at it in another video. This is just so you can see all the glands in their places. After that, we've got two glands. These are the adrenal glands. They sit just on top of your kidneys. Remember, you've got two kidneys. They're kind of round the back, down the bottom. Kidneys clean your blood. Well, the adrenal glands sitting on top of them produce adrenaline. We're going to look at that in a second in this video, but on the next slide. So we'll jump on from that. Next ones, and we are going to look at these in a bit more detail as well. This is where my diagram gets a little bit weird, because you'll notice I've put 2 in blue and 2 in pink. Very stereotyped colorings, I know, I apologize. But what we've got here, these two, both the blue ones and the pink ones, the blue ones are found in men or males, the pink ones are found in females. These are the testes in males and the ovaries in females. So my diagram's got both. People don't have both. I'm just putting them both on one diagram. Collectively, those are called the gonads. So if you're male, your gonads are your testes. If you're female, your gonads are your ovaries. Now, those produce really important hormones as well. Ovaries, estrogen and progesterone. Testes produce testosterone. They're responsible for some of the changes that we see at puberty and the kind of maintenance of basic maleness and femaleness, if there is such a thing. We're going to look at those on another slide as well. But what you've got on here at the moment, those are all the glands that you need to know in their correct places with the hormones that they produce. So I would really strongly suggest you take a shot of this because it tells you exactly where they are. But last little thing from this, I need you to understand this concept of target organs. I said when we were talking about letters that a letter goes to the right person because it's got their address. Well, with hormones, if these glands put them into your blood goes everywhere in your body. So how does the hormone know where it's supposed to send its message to? Well, this is this concept of target organs. So if the pituitary wants to specifically speak to a particular organ down here, the liver, let's say, what it does, it releases the hormone that goes everywhere in the blood, but only specific target organs have a protein receptor on their membrane that's complementary to the hormone. So if those hormones are this kind of shape and they're floating through the blood, you might have a receptor like this only on the target organ, the cells that you want to respond to the hormone. So it can lock in and that cell can then go, oh, I'm locked onto my hormone, I can respond. Every other cell in the body won't have a receptor like that, might be like that. So the hormone will just bounce off it, it won't affect it. So this concept of target organs is really, really important. And this ensures that only the correct cells respond to the message that's sent out. So we can kind of adapt our analogy of the letters up there to it being, if I wanted to write a letter to my mum, I don't just write a letter, put it in the post, it goes straight to my mum. I write 1 billion letters, all addressed to my mum, and I throw them up into the winds, and the wind carries them all over the planet. But my mum might be the only one to read that, read the name, read the address, and go, oh, that's me. This address is complementary to me. I'll read it, I'll get the message. Everyone else would go, oh, it's not mine, throw it away. That's a really wasteful system, but it works And evolution only needs to create systems that work. They don't have to be the best, most perfect system there is. They just need to work. Okay, so take a screenshot of this. Hopefully this allows you to understand what hormones are, how they work, what the main glands are, and what the hormones are that you need to know. So as I said, there's two key things that we're going to go through on this video, examples of those hormones. The first one is adrenaline, which we'll do on this slide. The next one's going to be the hormones from the gonads that control the changes in puberty. That's all we're doing in this video. But this one on adrenaline is really, really important because it links up lots of different parts of the syllabus, which means it's a really good one to revise, but it also means it's a bit of a favourite with the examiners. Now, adrenaline is the supercharging hormone. It supercharges your body with energy. Now, you may have heard of the response to adrenaline as the fight or flight reflex, but we're going to upgrade that now. We're going to update it because it's not really called that anymore. It's nowadays called the triple F reflex. This is because it's not just fight or flight, it's fight, flight or freeze. It's been found that some people, their automatic response to adrenaline is to freeze, not just fight or take flight. But you are kind of pre-programmed to do one of those three things. But we'll talk about that more in a minute. But what we're saying here is that you have evolved the triple F reflex to increase your survival chances in the case of a scary or dangerous situation. Now, back when we were first evolving and we were sort of hunters and we were scavengers and we were rooting around and foraging and finding all this stuff, there were dangers all the time. And if you weren't prepared for them, those dangers could have killed you. That's the end of your evolutionary line. So if there was a scary event, for example, suddenly you were out in the forest and there was a bear, okay? A bear is a massive scary thing that could easily end your life. So that's the scary incident. Well, in response to that scary incident, which of course is a stimulus, link this back to our nervous pathway stuff, what you're going to do is pick up that information using your sense organs, your receptors. In this case, it's going to be eyes and probably ears if he's roaring like that. So you're going to pick that up by your sense organs. You're going to send a signal down your sensory neuron to the coordinator. Now, in the case of adrenaline, because it's a reflex, that coordinator will be the spine. Remember, that's what deals with involuntary responses. That's then going to send a signal down a motor neuron to the adrenal glands. The adrenal gland acting as the effector. So remember, it's still stimulus, receptor, coordinator, effector. We now need a response. That response will be that adrenaline is secreted into the blood. So there's our nervous pathway linking up to the first videos in this playlist. But it's what happened next that's really important and links in lots of your physiology. So adrenaline comes from the adrenal gland. It's secreted into the blood. That then goes everywhere in the body, but it's picked up by receptors on the heart. So the heart is the target organ for adrenaline. Now, in response to adrenaline, the heart increases its heart rate, starts beating much, much faster. This is why when something scary happens, you can feel your heart racing. That's the adrenaline that's caused that. Now, because there's an increase in heart rate, there's going to be more oxygen and glucose transported to the cells because oxygen and glucose are in your blood. If your heart's beating faster, your blood's moving faster around your body, that's delivering oxygen and glucose to your cells at a much more rapid rate. Well, remember what cells do with oxygen and glucose. They do respiration. Respiration creates lots and lots of energy. So you've got a massive energy release, basically, in response to the scary situation. Now, that supercharges your body with that energy for very, very good reason, because you might fight. In the case of a bear, probably not a great option, but some people's automatic instinct to adrenaline is it supercharges them and just makes them start attacking. If it's a bear, not a great plan. Your best response there would be to take flight or run away. And because you're supercharged with this energy from respiration caused by the adrenaline, your legs are going to have much more power. You're going to be able to run so fast and hopefully outrun or climb away from, get away from the bear, and you're going to survive. But the third thing that some people do is they just freeze. Now, this is not a bad thing to do. If you're in the woods and this bear's popped out 20, 30 meters away from you and you just totally freeze, and it's not just freeze, stop moving, that charge up of energy makes all your muscles tense. So it's not just that you stop moving like that, it's that you go and you tense up really tense, using that energy to keep as still as you can. Now that might be really useful, because if that bear's 20 yards away, maybe he's not roaring, maybe he's just yawning, maybe he's just wandering about. Look at the picture. Is it that aggressive necessarily? He's seen you, he might just go, oh, you freeze, you don't move, and he goes, oh, that's a boring thing, and he wanders off. If you attack him, he's going to fight back. You might die. If you run off, he might go, oh, okay, that's a fun game, I'm going to chase them and attack them. So freezing might be a really good thing to do. But whatever it is, this sequence of events above me is a really good linking of the nervous pathway to a hormonal response, to your physiology with the heart, to bioenergetics with respiration. So you've got lots of the course in this example, which is why it's a great one to revise and why it comes up in the exams a lot. So take a screenshot of this one, make sure you've revised it. Okay, last hormonal one that we're going to talk about in this video, and this is, whilst it's a really, really important process, we're going to go quite fast on this because there's not a lot in the biology specification on the hormonal changes at puberty. But what we're basically talking about is a metamorphosis, just like you see in caterpillars up here. They start with an egg, they hatch into a caterpillar, they form their chrysalis, do their metamorphosis inside, and emerge as a butterfly. There's very distinct stages of a life cycle, but humans aren't really much different. We have got babies. You start off as a baby is going to turn into a child is going to turn into an adult, and they look very different from each other. If I pulled up a picture of a 5-year-old and I said to you, what's that, baby, child or adult, you'd recognize it immediately. You wouldn't have to stop and go, oh, hang on, let me have a think a minute. They look really different. The body proportions are different. The facial arrangements are quite different. You know, it's so obvious what's a child and what's an adult or what's a baby. They're physiologically, or morphologically, I should say, quite distinct looking. Okay. Now, the changes that happen at puberty are really quite significant and massive. Maybe not as obvious as a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, but still very, very distinct. So let's think about why those changes happen and what the purpose of it is. So the purpose of puberty is to mature the body to a state where it can reproduce, to create and raise the next generation of humans. Notice I put create and raise in bold there, because creating a human, making a baby, whilst biologically that's complex, that's not enough to get a successful next generation. Humans take a lot of care and raising. We actually take more than any other species on the planet, and it's because of our heads, because of our brains. We're actually given birth to way before really we should be. You think about most wild creatures, the mother gives birth and the child will get onto its feet within a number of hours or start caring for itself, or in a lot of species the young is born and has to immediately care for itself, whereas humans, we have this very, very long period where we've got to be cared for. That's because we have to be born very, very early on, because if we were left to develop to a better stage, our heads would be too big to actually come out through the mother's pelvis to be born, so we wouldn't be able to come into the world. Both mother and baby would die. So we need this long period of raising our children. Now, what that means is that from a biological point of view, at least, that's the meaning of life, is to create more life or life would cease. So puberty is so important to turn children who can't make babies into humans who can make babies, to create another generation, so that generation can grow up and make babies of their own, and that generation can grow up and life carries on for generation after generation. If this didn't happen, we would go extinct at the current youngest generation. So it's really important. So let's look at what those changes are that make a child grow up and go through puberty to a stage where they can have children. So female changes first, and these are under the control largely of estrogen and progesterone, which we said on the first slide was from the female gonads, which are the ovaries. So the key changes here, firstly, the menstrual cycle begins. Now in another video we'll look at the menstrual cycle, but it's most basic. The menstrual cycle is when women start to mature their eggs to create an egg that can be fertilized to grow into a baby. Prior to puberty, they don't have that monthly cycle of maturing and creating this egg, so they simply can't get pregnant, can't have babies. Okay, very good reason for that is because a child's body wouldn't be able to cope with the hardships and the difficulties of pregnancy, of growing a baby. So girls grow up to a certain age where, okay, the body can now cope with being able to raise a baby, and that's when menstrual cycle begins. Okay, of course, in reality, it's still very, very young for a girl to get pregnant in early teenage years, but biologically, it's possible for that child or that teenager to carry a child, but it's not healthy, which is why most humans all over the planet tend to leave having babies into 20s or 30s. Okay. Second one, the hips widen. Now, this is literally a change in the pelvic bone. So the bone that's your pelvis in the middle of your body in females at puberty dramatically increases, shifts its shape and size and becomes much bigger. That's because the female pelvis has a big hole through the middle of it to allow a baby to pass through. If the pelvis didn't increase in size, the hole through the pelvis would be too small for a baby's head to get through. So that's why girls develop hips. Third one, breast development. Of course, babies, human babies, are reliant on breast milk from the mother's breasts. Same as all mammals. Okay, all mammals produce milk to feed their young. But in humans, that milk comes from the breast tissue, which can produce milk. Not all the time. It only produces milk once a woman has given birth, because that's other hormonal triggers that make the milk production come into the breast. But that goes back to the raising the child. So the first two there are about being able to have a baby, get pregnant and give birth to the baby. The breast development is being able to feed the baby so you can raise it to survival age. Moving on then to the key male changes. There's fewer male changes and with different purpose. The first one is the same as the female one in that you've got to be able to produce your gametes. Remember, that's through meiosis. We watched a video on that, or I made you a video on that. And in males, it's sperm production. So males are only able to start producing sperm, start doing meiosis. Once puberty kicks in, they can make sperm. That means those sperm can then fertilize the egg and create a baby. The testes need to descend away from the body. The whole reproductive organs mature, develop and get bigger. But the testes, the balls, need to drop away from the body because the sperm are kept inside the testes. And by having the testes a little bit further away from the body, it can keep them cooler. That's better for the sperm. They can survive a bit longer. They're less likely to denature, get damaged, and it means they'll be more viable and more likely to fertilize an egg. Now, these next changes are for totally different purpose to making a baby. These are still about raising the baby and kind of protecting the family. And you've got to think back now, thousands and thousands and thousands of years where the females would have been pregnant or nursing a small child pretty much for a massive chunk of their adult life. So the man's job, all he really had major responsibility for, was keeping them safe, keeping them protected, keeping them provided for. So increased body size and musculature, this is why it's very easy to tell a small boy from a man, because chest broadens, shoulders widen, muscles get bigger, get stronger. That's so you can fight off any enemies, any danger, but also so you can run and hunt and get food. It's the same reason that goes with the voice deepening. In males, the larynx gets bigger. They can make deeper, louder sounds so that groups of males could go out and shout to each other and coordinate an attack for better hunting. It's thought that that's the main reason why the voice deepened. Whereas in females, the voice doesn't deepen, it stays reasonably high-pitched like a child's voice, because higher-pitched sounds don't travel as far, they don't resonate as much, so they're less easy to be heard. That's good if you're the female or the children in the cave, in the dwelling, wherever you are, because you're less likely to attract predators to you. Whereas males need big and scary to communicate and perhaps to scare off anything that could be a threat. The last one I'm going to put on here is true for both of them, and it's body hair. Body hair is a hygiene thing. It's not really to do with making babies, but it is about your own survival. You start to develop more body hair because it can trap pathogens away from the body, makes you less likely to get ill. Okay, so these are all the hormonal changes that happen at puberty, and they're largely all geared up to creating the next generation of humans so that we continue as a species. Okay, as promised near the start, here's a summary table of the hormones that are here. But I really need you to focus on something very, very important when you're doing your exams on anything to do with hormones. There are 4 key things the examiner wants you to talk about and that you should know about hormones. The name of the hormone, where it's produced, what its target organs are, and what it actually does. So I'm going to put you a table on here covering those 4 things. Now, some of these we've talked about, some of them we haven't. The ones we haven't really talked about, I'm going to leave in a pale grey, and we'll come back to them when we do those videos. But firstly, growth hormone from the pituitary has multiple target organs because your whole body needs to grow. And the message is simply grow, do more mitosis, get bigger. Okay. Next ones, I'm keeping them in the order from that first diagram. The FSH and the LH, they're in pale grey. I've only put them on here for completeness. We'll darken those as we do other lessons, and I'll give you a full table of this as we've completed everything. But I wanted them on this one just so you can see that you need to know them. The thyroid gland that produces thyroxine, again, multiple targets because it's telling all cells to increase or slow their metabolism. Insulin and glucagon we're doing on the next video. That's like blood sugar regulation. Adrenaline we've talked about, adrenaline which is produced by the adrenal glands that affects the heart. That's the fight, flight or freeze reflex. Testosterone from the testes doing the changes we've just talked about at puberty. Estrogen and progesterone doing the female changes. Again, all geared up for us to make a new generation to keep life going. So take a screenshot of this one, but the pale grey ones will be filled in over the next couple of videos. Right, so from here, head to body communication 8, which now looks at that blood glucose regulation. This is another example of homeostasis. You'll remember a couple of videos back, we did thermoregulation. This is another one about keeping things in balance, but wherein thermoregulation was governed by the nervous system, blood glucose regulation is governed by the endocrine system. So head to that one next. As always, please do subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Give this video a like if you found it useful, and do head over to all the extra information that's on my Facebook page for the Conscientious Biologist. Thank you.